Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Monty if you're new here, and in today's video, I'm going to be ranking every single book I read in 2025 from my personal worst to my personal best. Last year, I separated this into a nonfiction and a fiction video because it felt right, and I also read more nonfiction in 2024 than I did in 2025. This year, I'm just combining the two. Typical disclaimer, these are my opinions. That is all they are. They are intangible thoughts floating around in my tiny little head. They are not meant to harm you or to hurt your feelings in any way. They are meant to contribute to the larger conversation around these books and maybe even entertain you a little bit. I would not take me or this video all that seriously. I read 30 books in 2025, and honestly, it was not my best reading year. Not because of quantity, although 30 is a lot less than I read in 2024. It's more that I came out of this year with fewer new favorites. Looking back at this list of books, I don't feel like I identify with them the way I have in the past. So let's talk about them. My worst book of the year is not a controversial opinion, but it is a divisive one, and that is Great Big Beautiful Life by Emily Henry. When I see that someone has reviewed this, I almost never know which camp they're gonna fall into because the reviews on this are kind of all over the place. Obviously, I really didn't like this. I thought that the romance made no sense and was super rushed. And then the main storyline, where we're learning about the life of this famous woman, couldn't have cared less. I could not have cared less. I was so utterly bored reading about her. I am genuinely happy for people that loved this. I wish I had to. At number 29, I have Funny You Should Ask by Alyssa Sussman. I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't remember a single plot point of this entire book, and I didn't care enough to go and remind myself. I can tell you that this is your standard forgettable romantic comedy. I wouldn't go out of your way to read this unless you already own it and you're in the mood for something light and fluffy that you want to take with you on vacation. At number 28, I have The Wedding People by Alison Espach. I had high hopes for this one based off the internet's reaction to it, but sadly, I didn't love this, and the more that I've sat with it, the less that I've liked it. This is about a woman who checks herself into a fancy hotel with plans to end her life, only to get caught up into a week-long wedding celebration that she wasn't invited to. I see what the author was trying to do, and I guess she was successful because most people adore this book. Initially, I was into the plot setup and I was so excited about the writing style. It reminded me of Emily Henry and Fredrik Backman, two authors that I have historically really enjoyed. But as the plot progressed, I found myself increasingly frustrated with how everything was playing out, specifically the way suicide and depression were handled, and also the inclusion of a totally unnecessary romance subplot. At number 27, I have The Lost Story by Meg Schaefer. This is often pitched as an adult Chronicles of Narnia. It has a very fairy tale feel, complete with portal magic in an enchanted forest. The story follows two estranged childhood friends who once disappeared into the woods for 6 months, and now as adults are reunited when a young girl goes missing in the very same woods. The first half of this was incredibly strong. I was completely hooked by the setup and the mystery, but unfortunately, it really dropped off for me in the second half. There is a noticeable tonal shift that takes place in the middle of this book. It starts off reading like an adult novel, but abruptly halfway through veers into something that feels much more juvenile. Ultimately, this book felt like unrealized potential. The ideas were there, the execution was not. Number 26, Say You'll Remember Me by Abby Jimenez. After reading the Part of Your World series last year, I had some very high expectations going into this, and sadly, they were not met. This was very insta-lovey. I wasn't really rooting for our characters to be together because I didn't understand why they were a good match. I was actually more invested in the subplots than the actual romance. I will still be picking up whatever Abby Jimenez puts out in the future, but this was just okay. In my 25th spot, I put Out on a Limb by Hannah Bonham Young. You know, my opinion on this is definitely in the minority That should be stated. But I found this to be lackluster. I wanted to love it. I really wanted to love it, but I thought it was fine. In a nutshell, this is about two people who have a one-night stand and get pregnant. I was annoyed with this from the jump because the way that they got pregnant could have been easily avoided. And if you want more of an explanation on that, I dive into it in my summer reading wrap up. So I started off on the wrong foot with this book, and then nothing else ever redeemed it. I mean, don't get me wrong, there is positive stuff in here. There's really great disability representation, and our main male character is perfect, but I didn't like our female main character, and I didn't care that much about the romance. At number 24, I have We Used to Live Here by Marcus Kluwer. Here we have a classic example of it's not you, it's me. I am the problem here. I don't like horror, and I don't like when the lines of reality are blurred. If I did like those things, this book probably would have been higher up on my list. Number 23 is First Time Caller by B.K. Borison. This is a Sleepless in Seattle inspired romance, and I thought it was decent. It certainly had some pros. For one, our female main character is fantastic. She's independent and hardworking, but she's also got a great personality to boot. I also appreciated how the book showed that unconventional families can be just as beautiful and just as loving as traditional ones. That added a lot of heart to the story for me. That said, I did not like the male lead. He was not up to my standard for our leading lady. She was just so much cooler than him. So, the actual romance was not my favorite. And the last thing I'll say is the book is almost 450 pages. And it did not need to be. At 22, I have The Third Gilmore Girl by Kelly Bishop, the story of the actress who played the iconic role of Emily Gilmore in Gilmore Girls. To be frank, I thought I was gonna like this a lot more than I actually did. It is a breezy, quick read filled with entertaining stories about Kelly's life, but it read more to me like a resume than a memoir. It lacked the depth I was looking for. And I do think you have to be familiar with Kelly Bishop in some capacity to be interested in a lot of her story. At least the way that she tells it in the book. Because I'm such an avid watcher of Gilmore Girls, I did enjoy this book for the most part, but if you're not a fan of the show, I probably wouldn't recommend it. Number 21, Black Cake by Charmaine Wilkerson. This is a family drama about two estranged siblings that reconnect in the wake of their mother's death. Their mother has left them this long voice recording detailing her life story and divulging all sorts of secrets that they could have never guessed about her. I liked this story overall. It definitely had some really strong moments, but I think it suffered from having too much going on. For a debut, there was a lot here that worked really well, and even though it didn't fully land for me, I'm still really interested in picking up Charmaine Wilkerson's 2025 release. In my 20th spot, I put My Friends by Fredrik Backman. This book was probably my most anticipated release of 2025. The story is told across two timelines. In one, we follow four misfit teenage friends as they spend a life-changing summer together. And in the second one, we get one of those friends, now an adult in his 40s, looking back on that time. So I usually love the kinds of stories Backman tells and the way that he writes about the human experience. I'm not entirely sure what happened here. It might be that the novelty of his writing has faded for me over time, but for some reason in this, it felt like the emotional beats of the story were being pushed way too hard on me. It almost felt like too much of what he's typically good at, if that makes sense. If he had just reined it in a little bit, I think I would have loved this, but instead I walked away liking it. Number 19, Semi-Well Adjusted Despite Literally Everything by Alyson Stoner. Alyson Stoner is someone that I grew up watching in the Step Up movies and Cheaper by the Dozen, and they came out with a memoir this fall. I liked this. It reminded me a lot of I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy, which I don't think is all that surprising. I think a lot of children in the entertainment industry have unfortunately had to deal with very similar traumas. Something I love about Alyson Stoner is that they have dedicated their life, their career, their platform to stopping and preventing child exploitation. They are very clearly passionate about the topic, and through this memoir, we can see exactly why. This was not quite a perfect memoir. I had a couple of issues with it, but if you are an Alyson Stoner fan, I think you will really enjoy it. At number 18, we have The Favorites by Lane Fargo. In this, we are following a deeply toxic partnership in the competitive world of ice dancing. I had fun with this. I will give it that. It was messy and exciting and scandalous. And if you're into reading books about sports and high stakes competition like I am, that element is also definitely in here as well. For the first half of this, I was having a blast. I was having the time of my life. It was honestly on track to get a much higher rating for me than it ended up getting. But in the second half, the story leaned hard into recycled plot twists, and after a while, it started to feel repetitive rather than shocking. Generally speaking, I had a good time, not a great one. Number 17, Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. This was my only fact-based nonfiction read of the year, and I really liked it. I thought that I wasn't going to get that much out of this. I thought that I knew everything there was possible to know about sleep, but I ended up learning a lot. This is very accessible. It's very easy to read, and Matthew Walker did a great job of holding my interest from beginning to end, which is quite a feat for nonfiction. I think that this is a great starting point for someone that doesn't currently read a lot of nonfiction, but has been wanting to get into it. Number 16, Check and Mate by Ali Hazelwood, a great example of why you should give authors second and third chances. Ali Hazelwood wrote one of my worst reads of 2024, and I was this close to swearing off her for good, but there was a little voice inside my head that was telling me this would be good, and I listened to that voice, and that voice was right. This is a YA romance, although I would classify it as new adult personally, and it's about two teenagers who are training with and competing against each other for the world title in chess. Did the main character annoy me a little bit? Yes. Despite that, I thought the romance was genuinely adorable, and I'm a sucker for books that have any kind of game or sport in them, so I was thoroughly entertained while reading this. We are halfway there. At number 15, I have Ready or Not by Cara Bastone, my first romance novel with a pregnancy trope in it, and I ate it up. I really need to read more from Cara Bastone because I'm hoping that she will become a new favorite romance author for me. Simply put, this is about our main character, Eve, who has a one-night stand with a guy that she meets at a bar, and then she immediately gets pregnant. Quickly after, she finds out that the father of her future child has gotten back together with his ex, which complicates things in the exact way that you would expect. And that's all you really need to know about the plot. There are supporting characters in Eve's life that you will find out about if you haven't already read this, and they are all lovely. My main selling point for you is that it really felt like the couple at hand was meant to be, making it all the more satisfying when they do finally get together at the end. I also really liked the discussions around pregnancy, but that might not be for everyone. This book didn't stir that much emotion inside of me, which is why it's ranked here in the middle, but it was a super, super solid romance. At number 14, A Prayer for the Crown Shy by Becky Chambers. This is the second book in a cozy sci-fi duology. They are both novella length, and they are really quick, easy reads. They follow these semi-philosophical conversations between a monk and a robot about what humans really need. When I read the first book last year, it knocked my socks off. I thought it was so thought-provoking, very heartwarming, sweet, comforting. It felt like a warm cup of tea. And this second book held the exact same energy, but I liked it a little bit less, and here's why. I don't normally gravitate towards cozy books. So one novella was kind of the perfect amount for me. By the time I got to the sequel, it felt like it was too much of something that I prefer in smaller doses. But even after exceeding my quota for coziness in books, I still did really enjoy this. So I feel like that says something. We are just moving right along, aren't we? At number 13, I have 11/22/63 by Stephen King. This is primarily historical fiction with some time traveling splashed in. It's about a man in present day who gets tasked with going back in time and preventing the assassination of JFK. I really enjoyed this. This is a very long book, so the pacing is on the slower side, but I was never bored while I was reading this. The plot synopsis of this makes it sound like it would be very action-packed, and it certainly has its moments, but this is more of a character-driven story, following along with our protagonist on his self-journey. There's some romance, which was arguably my least favorite part of the book, but there's also some found family, which was definitely my favorite part of the book. And the ending is one of the most beautiful endings I've ever read. Number 12, The Quiet Tenant by Clémence Michelon. I believe this is the only thriller on my list, and it was so good. It's about this serial killer who disguises himself as a decent guy. He's beloved by his community in the small town that he lives in. And we learn about him through the eyes of 3 women in his life. His daughter, because he has a daughter, his new girlfriend, and his current victim. I was completely hooked from beginning to end. It is a very quick read, but it's not an easy one. It's dark, it's disturbing, it's intense. It also has a lot to say about how women in our society are treated, and that felt very validating. My biggest problem with this book is that I wasn't completely satisfied with the ending. There was one loose thread that I wish would have been tied up. Otherwise, a super strong thriller. Number 11 is Blood Over Brighthaven by M.L. Wong. This is a standalone fantasy, which is fantastic. It gives readers the opportunity to dip their toes into a fantastical story without having to commit to a series. The story features a strong yet morally gray female character. It takes place in an academic setting. The magic system is so fun. It's essentially computer coding. I think the reason so many people are connecting with this story is that it does such a great job of weaving in important and culturally relevant themes into a highly engrossing story. The plot doesn't get lost in the messaging, and vice versa. The book isn't higher up on my list because it was too heavy-handed for my taste, and that's not something that's going to bother everyone, but it did detract from my personal enjoyment. And we've officially made it to my top 10. In my 10th spot, I have Brotherless Night by Vivi Ganeshananthan. I read this book for my award-winning books vlog that I did earlier this year because it won not one, but 2 different awards in 2024. It won the Carol Shields Prize for Fiction and the Women's Prize for Fiction. And I completely get why. So this is a historical fiction that takes place during the Sri Lankan Civil War. It reads almost like a memoir. It's written from the perspective of a young Tamil girl as her brothers become involved in the conflict in different ways. The most stunning part of this novel was the way that the author depicted the moral nuances of war. Both sides had blood on their hands. Both sides committed atrocities. Nothing was as simple as good and bad, right and wrong. I thought it was incredibly thought-provoking. Reading this also made me want to learn so much more about the Sri Lankan War. I spent almost as much time as I did reading the book as I did researching the history behind it. And while this book did spark my curiosity, something was missing for me emotionally. Some of the big twists, the big events, didn't hit me as hard as expected, while the quieter, more intimate moments really did stay with me. A truly great book, but not quite perfect. Number 9 is This Could Be Us by Kennedy Ryan. This is the second book in the Skyland series, which follows 3 best friends, each book following a different woman as she navigates love, life, and everything in between. I love this series. I love that the women are a little bit older than what we typically see. They're in their late 30s, early 40s, and I think that it adds a level of maturity to the stories that I find to be so refreshing. Every book is dual POV, so you also get the perspective of the main character's love interest, and I always love that. Kennedy Ryan also uses her books to raise awareness on topics that are near and dear to her. In the first book, it was pregnancy loss, and in this one, it is autism. In this particular installment of the series, we are following Soledad, who is trying to rebuild her life after a particularly messy divorce. She's trying to kickstart a career after being a homemaker for most of her life. She's trying to take care of her 3 kids, and she's also trying to find out who she is outside of her marriage. While she's juggling all of that, she meets a wonderful guy, a true gem of a human. However, it is very much a right man, wrong time type of situation because she's got a lot going on. If you are a romance reader and you haven't picked these books up, you definitely should. Just know that this book in particular leans heavily into the women's fiction side of things because it is so focused on Soledad's journey. My only gripe with this book is that it did get a little cheesy at times, but it is such a minor complaint. Moving right along to number 8. Dinner for Vampires by Bethany Joy Lenz. This is about Bethany Joy Lenz's time in a cult while she was filming the hit drama series One Tree Hill. This had everything that I look for in a memoir. It was raw, it was well written, it was engaging, I learned something, it was told from a unique perspective, and I also feel like I related to it in some ways, which feels crazy to say. I highly recommend this to people who are interested in learning about cults. Even if you don't know anything about the author before going into it, you don't need to. Although if you are a One Tree Hill lover, it'll probably add a little something. Number 7 is Heartstopper Volume 5 by Alice Oseman. This graphic novel series is one of the most endearing pieces of work you will ever come across. It is a queer romance following our sweet high school boys, Charlie and Nick, as they fall in love with each other. And it's the best. These books are so tender. I think that if they had originally been written as regular novels with full narratives, they would have come off as too saccharine, but as graphic novels, they are perfect. If you're ever in need of a little mood booster, pick these up. You can read them in a single sitting and you'll leave the experience feeling all warm and fuzzy inside. Okay, at number 6, I have Rejection by Toni Tulathamudi. This is a unique one because I rated it 5 stars and I stand by that rating, but I don't think that I would ever read this again. Please don't ask me to make sense of that because I will not be able to. This is a collection of 6 semi-adjacent short stories about people as they deal with rejection in a variety of ways. This is 100% the most uncomfortable I've ever felt reading a book, but I was also so taken by it. I will never be able to properly articulate my thoughts on this. I do not recommend this to everyone, but I do recommend it to the right person that is ready to engage with this type of material. That was a terrible explanation of this book. I am well aware. I would go and look at other people's reviews on this to gain a better understanding. At number 5, we have my favorite nonfiction of the year, and that is Cockroaches by Scholastique Mukasanga. This is about the author's experience living through the Rwandan genocide and losing nearly every single person that she ever cared about. It is a memoir that is truly unlike any other one that I've ever read, and I have read many. What sets it apart is that not once does the author seek to center herself, although this was something that she lived through. Instead, she chooses to shine a light on the lives that were stolen in the genocide. That was the whole point of her book, was to commemorate the family and friends that she lost and to restore their humanity in a history that has often reduced them to statistics. This book made my heart ache. I technically could have read this in a single sitting given its length, but emotionally, I do not think that I could have handled that. If you're looking for an easy read, this is not the one. But if you're looking for a firsthand account of the Rwandan genocide and you're ready to face the facts head on, then this is absolutely the book for you. In my fourth spot, I have Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins. This book needs no introduction. I'm not gonna sit here and tell you what The Hunger Games is about. The woman that Suzanne Collins is, to write a prequel that she never intended to write, and to have it come off as if it was part of the plan the whole time, is so wildly impressive to me. I denounce the argument that this is pure fan service. For me, every character appearance felt so intentional and meaningful and added so much depth to the original trilogy. I love this, okay? And I cannot wait for the movie to come out later this year. Top 3, baby. In my third spot, I have James by Percival Everett. I think this is the first book I gave 5 stars to in 2025. This acts as a modern day companion novel to the adventures of Huckleberry Finn, but you do not need to read the classic in order to read this one. I didn't, and I was just fine. The story follows the same plot as Huckleberry Finn, where an enslaved man named Jim and a young white boy named Huck Finn travel down the Mississippi River together to escape their respective troubles. However, this book retells the journey from the perspective of Jim, or James as it were, which recontextualizes the original narrative. Beyond being an entertaining story full of adventure, this book has a lot to say about slavery and racism, and Everett delivers those ideas brilliantly. He challenges so many commonly held misconceptions about slaves and their intelligence, and in turn, their worthiness. And it was so well done. It was so well written. There really isn't anyone I wouldn't recommend this book to. If you're intimidated by this because it's based off of a classic, don't be. It is so approachable and not at all difficult to read. We have made it to my top 2. And honestly, these last 2 spots are interchangeable. I have gone back and forth between where to place these final 2 books so many times, and I'm just gonna run with what I have written down. My number 2 book of the year is Atmosphere by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I am so unoriginal in having this in my final 2 books of the year. I wish that I had something more obscure to share with you so that I could introduce you to something new. Alas, I am but a sheep. I'm a simp. I'm a simp for Taylor Jenkins Reid. I'm obsessed with her. She doesn't miss for me. Atmosphere is a historical fiction about a woman named Joan, who was one of the first women astronauts to go into space in the 1980s. The narrative is split into 3 threads. That's hard to say. Her time at NASA, her family life, and her romantic relationship. Each storyline adds context and weight to the others, and by the end of the book, everything just clicks into place. I adored our main girl, but I also really loved the side characters. They were so necessary to experience the fullness of the story. If you go into this thinking that you're gonna get an epic space saga, you're probably gonna be disappointed, because this is a story about human connection more than anything else. And it had me in my feels. First fiction book to ever make me cry, and I feel like that says a lot. And now for my number 1 book of the year, Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan. Full disclosure, this is the last book that I read, so I know that there's some recency bias at play, but I do think that this book is undeniably excellent. And outside of Atmosphere, there was no other book that wowed me as much. The story is set during Christmas time, but don't go into it thinking that you're going to get a cozy Christmas story. Small Things Like These is about a man living in small town Ireland who uncovers a secret within the Catholic Church that weighs heavily on his conscience. This book is simultaneously depressing and hopeful. It's a powerful story about courage and the quiet moments that define a person's character. A key theme in here that was explored so expertly is how one develops a sense of morality and how that can be done outside of organized religion. There are other ways to gain a sense of what is right and what is wrong outside of following strict religious rules. And there's even more in here to chew on, but that particular message really struck me. Small in size, but mighty in impact, I absolutely adored this book. And after reading it, I fully plan on diving into Claire Keegan's entire catalog this year. And that's that on the 30 books that I read in 2025. If you watched this video all the way through, you are such a trooper. Thank you so much for being here, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.